It's 7:37 on Wall Street. This is Bloomberg Surveillance. Well, he's not a clunker, and we pay him a ton of cash. Doron Levin, Bloomberg editor-at-large, in from our Detroit bureau here in New York on the day. Just found this out a few minutes ago, Doron. On this day in 1959, in the first nationwide closed-circuit television news conference, Ford Motor Company introduced the Falcon.
I remember it. It had bucket seats.
Yes, it did. They went on to make them till 1971. Little known fact, but the Mustang, sort of based on a Falcon platform, it's interesting. If you see a Falcon now, it's hard to remember. That was a compact car. It was considered a small car, and now it's a full-size car.
They still make the Falcon?
No. They went away in 1971.
I think they might still make it in Australia. It seems to me that name is alive somewhere in the world.
Maybe the name, but it's not the same.
Yes, there is. It might be alive in Australia.
Mike Jackson was just on CNBC from Auto Nation. He's owed $55 million, it says here in the Bloomberg headlines, thanks to Kevin Reynolds for these headlines. And his team, he's at a $10.5 million rate. What have you learned with all your research?
Well, $55 million, I think, was the number that he said that his company is owed by the U.S. government. And there are a lot of dealers out there that are hoping that money is going to be paid to them very quickly because they had to lay out the cash for these cars, and now they're waiting for the U.S. government to reimburse them.
Well, how critical is this issue? How big a deal is it?
You know, I saw some more numbers, Doron, about a chain of dealerships in western Massachusetts. They had done 160 cash for clunker deals. As of last week, they have been paid for 8. Well, this is essentially a small business that's owed $500,000.
The government has been very clear that they're going to pay this back. They're going to pay this money, and they're going to get it going as quickly as they can. This whole system was erected very, very quickly.
Sure.
And so they don't really have the systems in place to do this as quickly as some of these dealers may need it.
So I'm a small automobile dealer. I go to my bank and say, gee, thanks for lending me the money, and the government's going to pay me back any day now. So how about a break on the interest?
One hopes that the banks, some of whom are also on government support, will understand exactly what fix they're in.
Can I point out, Bloomberg Television, thank you, Robin, for the great B-roll. They just showed all the clunkers, like with clunker written across the windshield. They look better than my first 5 cars. I mean, how clunker is a clunker?
A clunker was anything, really, that could not get a certain amount of fuel efficiency and might have been 10, 15 years old. But the main idea was if it had a big dent in it and needed some service and it wasn't worth $4,500 on the market, then you could turn this in and get $4,500 from the government. So it's very clear that cars that were being used, that were perfectly serviceable and that would have been on the road for much longer were taken out of service. And this is what really inflated the rate in August. We saw a big rate of 14 million in August. And the big question now is in September, are we going to see a drop to 6 or 7 or 8 million?
Well, what are we going to see in October and November? I mean, Ken and I have been talking about this for the last couple of days. What's the new normal for the auto business?
Well, what the normal was prior to clunkers was about 10 million. And the real question is how much underlying demand is there from 14 million? 14 million is what we can get if the government kicks in almost $5,000. If the government's not kicking in $5,000, what's the demand going to be? And it's probably around 10 million, but not much more than that. We'll find out probably not in September, because September should have a big drop in reaction to this, and then maybe in October we'll find out what the natural rate is.
Yeah, August was, we say 10 million, 14 million. This is taking a month and projecting to an annual rate. August was a little over 14 million, 14.1. And that number's been below 10 every month this year.
Well, don't forget, as a result of this program, a lot of these inventories have been wiped out at dealers, and what the car companies are doing now is ratcheting up production. That means that that means that auto workers are being called back. That means that supply companies are being ramped up to provide parts, and then some of those supply workers are being called back, and then all of the businesses that rely on the automobile business are going a little bit faster now. So there is a ripple effect in the economy, and the question is, will it hold? Will people feel a little bit more confident? Will people think, okay, now it might be safe to go out and buy a new car? And if that catches on, and that's clearly what the government wants, then we should see a rise in that rate to something, but not back what it was before the collapse.
Well, isn't the question, Doron, we've seen production ramp up for how long?
Well, production is something that you really can't turn on and off from day to day. So when they talk about a quarter, we're really talking about production being ramped up for at least 3 months and possibly 6 months.
Well, what's the mood in Detroit now as a result of all this?
The mood in Detroit is pretty grim in any event because there have been lots and lots of firings and layoffs at the white-collar level. The city is broke. The city has about $20 million in cash, and for a city that size, it's not a lot of money. The state is really surviving on the stimulus funds from the federal government, some of which they're passing down to the cities. So everybody really needs some kind of a boost in Southeast Michigan, in Michigan overall, and certainly in the city of Detroit.
Yeah, I mean, we should point out that the state of Michigan was in a recession for a couple of years before the rest of the country.
Certainly nobody in Michigan is having a lot of ease selling cars, selling houses, selling anything. When you drive around, you see lots of vacant buildings. You see lots of offices for rent and lots of people looking for jobs.
What did you and our Detroit team learn in yesterday's statistics? Within the minutia of it, what struck you?
Well, we learned, first of all, that the winners were Ford, Honda, and Toyota. They seem to have the biggest inventory of cars that could be traded for clunkers during that month, so they did especially well. GM and Chrysler did not do well, neither did Nissan. GM and Chrysler probably do not have enough vehicles in inventory to sell, and people are a little bit wary of General Motors and Chrysler having gone through bankruptcy. The research seems to indicate that they're not high on the consideration lists of a lot of car buyers, such as they are.
Chrysler's down to a 28-day supply. In the industry, the standard is 60, right? Chrysler at 28. Ford at 36 and GM at 48.
Well, part of this is because there's not a lot of confidence at the executive level that they can put cars out there and expect that customers will come in. So it becomes a spiraling effect downward.
Well, thank you so much for coming in. This has been really timely, and $20 million in the Detroit coffers. That's a shock.
It's a very little amount of money. We have a new mayor, Dave Bing, an NBA All-Star, who's come into office with a lot of hope. He has to run for re-election. We've just had a mayor in Detroit who's just gotten out of jail, and so it's not a happy time in Detroit right now.
And Dave Bing's a business guy. I mean, since the NBA, he had a successful business.
Yes, he worked for. He was a supplier for General Motors.
Well, thank you so much, Doron Levin, from our Detroit News Bureau, our editor at large.